this topic will be about teaching or teaching presence or online presence in this mode of instruction. Many of you have expressed that you are also doing this combination of printed materials with some online or with an online component for some of the learning activities that you have designed for your courses. So initially, we will be talking about how can we design or integrate our online presence or our presence without us being physically present in the learning environment because of the kind of instruction that we are doing now. So let me start my presentation. So in this session, you should be able to describe what teaching or online presence is in the context that we are delivering instruction now, design teaching presence in an online course, and reflect on the course that you are handling from the lens of online presence. So although what we will be discussing are elements for an online course, because somehow many if not most of you, all of you have expressed that there is an online component in the way you are doing your teaching delivery. This is also an opportunity for us to reflect on what will be the equivalent of this online presence or teaching presence when we are talking of offline learning resources or offline materials. Okay, so again, this is our opportunity to review and check the kind of course design that we have done for the courses that we are handling or teaching this semester. Okay? So what is teaching presence? Based on what the literature says, effective online learning is best understood in terms of the interrelationship of three types of presence. So we have the cognitive presence or the ability of learners to construct meaning and build understanding. So the cognitive presence is on the part of our learners. So they should have, or they should be able to acquire that ability to construct meaning. But that cognitive presence is also designed by the teachers, okay? Social presence is the capacity of learners to present themselves as real people with individual characteristics. So they should be able to do that. They should be able to really express themselves based on their context when they do their learning activities. And of course, the teaching presence is the design and facilitation of cognitive and social presences to achieve learning outcomes. So when we talk of teaching presence, we are also pertaining or referring to how we design the cognitive presence. Kasi sabi natin, it is on the part of the students, the social presence also on the part of the students, but it is for us teachers to make sure that our learners will be able to have this cognitive and social presence. Okay, so our concern now is how we will be able to do it. Our teaching presence as expressed in the way we design and facilitate so that there will be cognitive and social presences among our students. And those are essential for us to achieve the learning outcomes. Okay? So unlike in face-to-face teaching, which depends on physical presence and teacher immediacy, we know that in face-to-face or classroom instruction, we really don't have to think about this because our students can see us, we can talk directly to them, they can hear us, diba? But in online education or in remote instruction, the teaching presence should be expressed in the way we design our courses, the way we organize the content, the way we facilitate our discussion, the interaction among our students, and the way we give instructions to our students. So doon natin ipaparamdam. We may not be, lagi ko sinasabi, we may not be physically present, but our presence is still felt by our students. That's why I think I have mentioned this in in my previous webinar sessions, that before we refer to this as teacher presence, but we do realize that it's not actually the physical presence that we really have to do. It's for our students to feel that we are with them in their journey, in their learning journey. So how are we going to do that in our courses, especially that we are into remote instruction? So teaching presence begins before the course commences. So bago pala magsimula, iniisip na natin, how am I going to design my courses so that my teaching presence can be felt? So when we act as instructional designer, when we plan, when we prepare the learning activities, then we are already starting to integrate the teaching presence in the course. So sa simula pa lang, when we are designing, iniisip na natin to. We are already considering this. And it continues during the course. So habang nag-aaral yung mga estudyante, habang tayo nagtuturo, tuloy-tuloy pa rin natin ini-integrate yung teaching presence as we continue to facilitate the discussion and provide direct instruction when required. But we also have to consider that even in our design, before the course starts, we can already provide direct instruction to our students. Nandun na yon, nandun na. So, itutuloy lang natin. We'll just have to make sure because the technology can allow us to do this. Okay? So, we continue integrating our teaching presence as we, during the semester or during the entire term of our teaching. So when we talk of designing for teaching presence, as I have mentioned, we are talking of design and organization of our course, facilitating the discussion and effective and frequent use of direct instruction. So anytime or every time that we think of teaching presence, these are the things that we have to keep in mind. Sa start, when we design and organize our course, while the course is ongoing, how we are facilitating the discussion, and how we are giving the instruction to our students. So teaching presence is broadly characterized as the virtual visibility of an instructor. So virtual visibility, hindi tayo nakikita pero nararamdaman tayo, kaya virtual visibility ang tawag nila. So there are three dimensions of teaching presence. One is the persona or the instructor's personality, teaching styles and interests, all the characteristics that go into the student's impression of the instructor. Probably in the context that we are in now, it may not be too difficult because in most cases, unless we are new in the university where we are teaching, or the students are new students in our university, then chances are they know us. They know us. They know how we look. They know how we act, etc. So, but sometimes some of them may also know our teaching style, our interest. Mahilig ba tayong, nakikita ba nila tayo na naglalaro, nagjo-join sa mga festivals, sa mga sports festivals. So, everything that when combined will form how the students see us, their impression of the instructor, of us, the teachers. So somehow, pag minsan siguro, if they will just judge us based on our physical appearance, sabihin nila, naku, suplado, terror, mataray, di ba? So sometimes they have that kind of different perceptions. But the way we interact with them, these impressions may change. So how are we going to present ourselves to our students is that dimension of teaching presence, the kind of impression that they have about us. Social presence or social dimension is another thing. It is the kind of connection that we make with our students and how we facilitate the kind of interaction that they do with their fellow learners so that they can build a strong learning community. And of course, the other dimension is the instructional. Or, of course, this is something that we are more concerned about is the role that we play, the teaching that we do so that we can guide our students through the whole learning process. So when we think of our presence in our course, let's think of all these three dimensions: the persona, the social, and the instructional. So these three dimensions consist of our teaching presence. So you can start now reflecting uh, on how you are constructing these different dimensions: your persona, the social dimension, and the instructional dimension. Okay, so how can we design an effective teaching presence in the way we have, or we are teaching now, in the way we are delivering instruction now and facilitating learning among our students? So as we continue to discuss these different strategies or mechanisms in designing our teaching presence, I suggest that you also reflect on how you did your course and what kind or what improvements can you still do at this point that classes have started. Probably some of you are into 1 month already of your classes. Some have just started, and probably there's still a few of you who are yet to start your academic year. So tip number one, or suggestion number one, we have mentioned that when we design teaching presence, it will start before you start teaching. So it will start with planning and preparing our course. Again, think that this suggestion may be for online course, but just the same, they are also applicable when we are designing our printed course materials, okay? So the first place where students get a sense of our teaching presence is in the design of our materials. So in designing the course, we should have these three key decisions. So ano ba yon? What do I want the students to learn? So what are the learning goals? Diba? So again, even if this is not an online course and we are producing printed materials for our students, we have the same concern. We have the same question. What do I want my students to learn? Okay? How will students and as teacher know if these goals are being accomplished? So what kind of feedback and assessment will I design into my course? If it's online, this is how I will do it. And if it is not online, this is also how I will do it. So what will the teacher and the students need to do in order for students to achieve the learning goal? So how will I teach the lesson? How will I teach the lesson? What learning activities will I ask my students to do so that at the end of the teaching process, we will be able to achieve the learning goals? So again, and then when we go back to other sessions wherein we discuss our course guide, our lesson plan, these are also the same things that were highlighted. The learning goals, assessment, feedback and assessment, and how we will do our teaching and develop the learning activities so that we can direct our students towards achieving the learning goals. Okay, so again, for an online learning environment, the emphasis shifts from preparing class sessions, di ba tayo, in a face-to-face setting, we are preparing, in my meeting with my students, in my class, this is what I will do. So instead of planning for that, we have prepared learning modules with specific learning goals. This is something that you discuss when there was this discussion about the course guide, about the study guide, right? So when we prepare our study guide, our lesson plan, we think of our learning goals, the reading assignments that we're going to give to our students, the instructional materials, learning activities, discussion board posting requirements, etc., assessment procedure. Lahat ng yon, we already developed at the start of the semester. And these are already indicative of our teaching presence. Again, when you design the modules for your course or your lesson plan or your study guides, these are the questions that you should regularly ask. So balik na naman tayo doon. What do I want my students to learn? How will they demonstrate their learning? What assignments or learning activities will support? So iterative yung process. Iterative. So sa simula pa lang, when we think of learning activities, when we think of how are we going to teach the lesson, it will always go back to these 3 questions. So we will support by asking these questions while designing the modules. We will support the learning of our students and will establish our teaching presence in the design of the course. So that's just tip number 1. So tip number 2. So na-design na natin, ano? So we are now teaching the course. So probably many of you are already in this stage. So how can we integrate our teaching presence now that the classes are ongoing? So this is in terms of facilitating online discourse or discussion. So skillful facilitation allows students to interact with one another and the instructor as teachers at a high level. So ito yung ating ipinopropose. This is something that we are proposing. This is something that we are recommending. Just so that our students will feel this teaching presence. We have to facilitate and skillfully do it in terms of allowing our students to interact with one another and interact with us. Okay? So in so doing, nararamdaman nila, okay, the teacher is here with us. I think I have also mentioned this as sort of a joke. When UPOU started shifting to online instruction, syempre, at the time, the teachers were not yet into that culture of checking the online course site regularly. Wala our culture at that time, that's 2001, ano? Our culture at that time, we're still in the 2nd or 3rd generation of distance education. So regularly checking the online course site has not yet been integrated into the culture or the habit of many of our FICs. So may nag-email sa akin, ma'am, nag-drop na po ba yung teacher namin? Kasi hindi po namin siya nararamdaman sa klase. So may ganun. And our students can feel that, can notice that. So skillful facilitation. So at the beginning of the course, faculty members can help facilitate this course through icebreakers that ask students to introduce themselves and find commonalities with other students. We can also, this is the time that we can ask our students to also introduce themselves with their fellow learners, ganyan. Probably they can also find classmates that are within their vicinity. Doon lang sila magkikita-kita, di ba? So, again, in my courses, there is that forum specifically dedicated for students to introduce themselves. But I will be the first to introduce myself. But in the event that my students are not yet online, agad nila na-access yung kanilang course site, and if they were able to get hold, especially during the time that we still have that combination of printed materials and online, yung online access for activities, academic activities, the course guide, the written course guide, or the printed course guide also has a portion for the introduction of the teacher. In a way, the way you introduce yourself will somehow set the tone on how the students will also introduce themselves. So probably if you will introduce yourself through a video, then your students will also be inspired and introduce themselves through a video material as well. So we set the tone. We somehow break that anxiety among our students. Ano ba mangyayari dito? Ganyan, di ba? So again, we model in the way we do things in our online course site. We are also setting the model and the standard for our students to follow. So establishing an etiquette policy at the beginning of the course can also help establish our teaching presence, while students, helping the students to understand our expectations. So syempre, katulad din sa isang classroom, we have our rules, we have our policies this is the same thing for an online course site. So the very first thing also is we set the rules, we set our policy about the netiquette, and also other course policies like deadlines, etc., respect for cultural diversity, how to post, diba? So nilalagay na natin lahat yan. Facilitating this course during the course is critical to maintaining interest, motivation, and engagement of students in active learning. So I think you have already discussed the topic on motivation, keeping the learners engaged and motivated. And this kind of discourse, facilitating online discussion, is also one way by which we can keep our students engaged and motivated, especially if we have integrated the different types of interaction into our course design, the learner-learner interaction, learner-teacher interaction, and the learner content interaction. In a way, we are already keeping them motivated and engaged. At the same time, we are directing them towards the achievement of the learning goals. Okay? So these are some examples of facilitating online discourse during the course. So identifying areas of agreement or disagreement. So ito yung example. So Joe Mary has provided a compelling counterexample to your hypothesis. So the teacher is calling the attention of Joe, diba? By saying, oh, Mary has provided a compelling counterexample to your hypothesis. O baka gusto mong sumagot. So you are already calling their attention. You may want to respond, and in a way you are facilitating the interaction among your learners. So point of areas, agreement or disagreement, seeking to reach consensus or understanding. So something like, oh, I think Joe and Mary are now saying essentially the same thing. Hindi naman pala sila nagtatalo, pareho naman pala sila ng sinasabi. But they have, both Joe and Mary will have to explain their sides, right? And in a way, we are keeping them engaged. We are also asking them to do some critical thinking by analyzing what their classmates are saying. So encouraging, acknowledging, or reinforcing student contributions. Thank you for your insightful comments. Diba? It also helps if we mention the name of the student, katulad ditong naunang example. So like for instance, ako when I answer discussion forum post, I will really say, hi Mary. So I acknowledge the student by name, by the personal name. If I will be able to recall how they prefer to call themselves in the introduction, and usually nilalagay naman nila yan after their post, diba? Kung sino sila, ganyan. So I will also refer to them by their first name, okay? In acknowledging their contribution to the discussion. Or if I want to summarize what had been discussed, so like for instance, five students are saying essentially the same thing. So I will mention the names of the students. Joe, Mary, Anna, etc. You are saying the same thing, but note that Anna has pointed out that these are the things that we need to carefully consider, something like that. So in a way, you are acknowledging their contribution. And that will somehow keep them engaged and motivated. Uy, nakita, may value pala yung contribution ko. We also can set the climate for learning. So don't feel self-conscious about thinking out loud on the forum. This is a place to try out new ideas after all. So we are encouraging our students to express themselves. Something like, oh, there's no right or wrong answer. What is important here is that you express your ideas. For all we know, what you probably think is non-consequential, yun pala yung importante. Diba? And whatever their comments can be or their contribution can be, can trigger others to think. Diba? Kung pag-iisipan nila yung bawa yung contribution ng kaklase nila, then it can be a trigger to new ideas. So we set that kind of environment in our online class. So again, we draw our participants, prompting discussion. We ask questions. So that they will be motivated to answer the questions that we have raised. Assessing the efficacy of the process. So something like, kung papansin natin na, oops, parang hindi na yata ito yung dapat nilang pag-usapan. Or the discussion is veering away from the learning outcomes that we have set for the lesson, for instance, then we now redirect them by asking further questions. Diba? By going back, nasaan na ba yung huling pinag-usapan that are still, the subject that is still on track. And then we prompt them to go back to the right track by asking questions that will trigger another set of discussion. So we have to note that every time that they will engage themselves in the discussion, they will also have to do some critical thinking. Hindi naman sila pwede mag-discuss nang wala silang contribute, di ba? So in a way, they need to read, they need to think, they need to assess, di ba? Before they can share. So the whole process will contribute to their learning and achieving the learning outcomes. So summarizing, I also highlighted it here. Summarizing an online discussion is also a good way to facilitate discourse and show your teaching presence. Na, uy, binabasa pala naman ni ma'am at saka ni sir yung ating mga sinabi. Even if wala itong mga ganitong examples na sinabi natin, pero if at the end of the discussion, we will put our summary of what had transpired. And if possible, even identifying people who contributed some ideas, then somehow our teaching presence will also be felt by our students. So as suggested by Peterson and colleagues, summarize the discussion periodically. So halimbawa, katulad ng pag-design ko sa klase, one module, we will be discussing this one module or one lesson in 1 week. So at the end of the week, then we summarize what had been discussed, what transpired in the interaction among our students, and then highlight what they should really be learning from that particular lesson based on the module objectives or the learning outcomes that we have set for the lesson. So that is something that we also can do. And instead, aside from highlighting what they should be learning from that particular discussion, we can also point out missing information just in case na hindi ito na-discuss doon sa pagpapalitan nila ng kanilang mga ideas. Okay? Okay, so that's number one, the way we facilitate online discussion. We can also facilitate discourse by simply requiring students, is more than requiring students to post to a discussion and reply to others. Ito, ginagawa ko rin ito dun sa klase ko. So they need to reply. In a way, it is providing the venue for them to interact with each other. But we have to note that this is facilitating, when we talk of facilitating online discourse, it is more than simply requiring them to do that. So it involves regularly reading and providing feedback on student postings, as I have mentioned. Encouraging participation, calling their names, etc. Yung mga samples na pinakita natin kanina. Moving the discussion forward when it stalls. Parang natigil na yung usapan, ano? So how can we move the discussion forward? What are the other areas that were not discussed, diba? So that is also our role as a teacher. Identifying and drawing out areas of agreement, we have pointed that out. Linkages, and articulate shared understanding. So I have discussed this, referring to students by name, encouraging student-student conversation. I have shown example of that. Sharing personal examples from your own research. So this is also an opportunity for us to share our own experience. Kasi ito parang, it also helps in the way our students see us. Diba? If we will share our own experience, our own difficulties, especially in doing online classes, diba? Travel or conversations, as long as we can relate them to our the lesson that we are discussing. In a way, by narrating our personal experiences, personal examples, we are contributing to the social and teaching presence, because at the end of the discussion, we should relate the narratives, our students' narrative. In fact, we can also ask them to share their personal examples and experiences. We are now facilitating or integrating the social and teaching presence, and towards the end, the cognitive presence into the design of our courses. Okay? So yung number 3 natin, providing direct instruction. So first is the design, facilitating online discourse or discussion, and the third is providing direct instruction to our students. So direct instruction is when we allow our students to see our disciplinary expertise. So kasi ang role natin dito, of course, there will be discussions. Chances are, they will be bringing their own thoughts, their own ideas, their own experiences. Diba? Yung practice nila. But our role here is to theorize. Theorize. Bring them back to theorizing. Bring them back to the level of abstraction because that is the knowledge that they will learn. In a way, help them build or construct knowledge. Okay? In some, of course, depending on your perspective, depending on your paradigm, ang sinasabi ng iba, it's the social or the co-creation of knowledge. Diba? So that is, if your paradigm is you create knowledge. Okay? Co-creation, building, the building of knowledge. Yung iba naman sabi, no, the knowledge is there. We just need to discover it. So co-discovery naman yon. So at UPOU, there is we have that kind of discourse at UPOU because depending on your your field of expertise, then you co-create, you discover, co-discover, help each other discover the knowledge. So may mga ganung perspective ang iba't ibang faculty ng UPOU. So every time we meet, we have these faculty meetings, etc. And the discussions will direct to that. We just recognize and we respect the different schools of thought that our colleagues have when it comes to what exactly is it that we are doing when we promote the online interaction. Is it co-creation of the academic text, co-building of academic text, or is it just the co-discovery of knowledge? So, iba-ibang ano yan. But the thing is, we have to direct or we have to help our students achieve that. The building of knowledge, the creation of knowledge, through the kind of interaction and learning activities that we are asking them to do in our course. So indicators of direct instruction include presenting content and questions. So ano yung lesson na ituturo natin sa kanila? What are the learning resources that we are asking them to interact with? What are the questions that we are asking them when we facilitate the online discussion? Because in a way, those questions will somehow reflect how well we know the subject that we are teaching. In fact, the way we design the learning activities, is also already indicative of our disciplinary expertise. Yung area of ano natin, expertise, the subject area that we are teaching. So focusing the discussion on specific issues, summarizing discussion, confirming understanding, disposing misperceptions, and injecting knowledge from diverse sources. These are all, in a way, methods or strategies by which we can provide direct instruction to our students. Again, try to reflect now. Are we or have we provided this to our students in the way we put together the learning resources that yung buong set ng learning resources that we gave to our students at the start of the semester? I think this is something that we say, but I don't think this is different. Whether you are teaching in classroom instruction or in online or distance education mode of delivery, we still need to do this. In terms of putting together, in terms of really designing the learning of our students, this is something that we do and somehow reflect our expertise. Ano ba yung ibibigay ko sa kanilang material para matutunan nila itong lesson, di ba? We need to read as well. We need to update our learning resources. We need to be able to present it in such a way or even provide trigger questions to facilitate their understanding of the lesson. So again, in the whole design of the course, it is already reflective of our disciplinary expertise. Okay, so the several roles instructors can take, again, balikan natin. Ito isinasummarize lang ito. These are the roles that we can take so that we can provide active teaching presence in our course. So amplifying. So ito nulat, drawing attention to important ideas, concepts, both in the course materials and student comments or other work. So if there are things that we need to draw our students' attention to, then we are already amplifying or making them feel that we are there with them. Curating, selecting and arranging readings, videos, and other resources. Ito sa simula pa lang ng klase, ginagawa na natin to, di ba? Naghahanap tayo ng mga reading materials, learning resources that we can give to our students so that they will be able to learn the lesson. Aggregating, patterns in discussion, di ba? Ito yung parang summarizing natin. Modeling, demonstrate the skills that we expect from our students, both in terms of interaction and analysis. Sometimes it is difficult for us to explain to our students na this is the kind of analysis that you want to take, the critical thinking that I want you to have. But if we will provide them with an example, then somehow malalaman nila, ganito pala. Ganito pala. So like even in my among my thesis advices, minsan nasabi ko sa kanila, your manuscript is not yet up to the level of a master's or a thesis or a PhD dissertation because I still cannot find you there. Ganon. But sometimes it is difficult for the students to understand. No, kaya ibig sabihin ni ma'am kapag sinasabi niya na, I still cannot find you there. Wala, sabi ko, you as the researcher is not yet in your manuscript. Because what I saw in your manuscript, what I read in your manuscript, are combination of copy and paste from the literature. Walang analysis akong nakikita. Walang analysis. Kinopya mo dito, pinost mo, pinagsama-sama mo dito, and it's not even making sense. Baka ma-charge ka pa ng plagiarism. Diba? Even if you're citing them. But there's nothing new. There's nothing new that I can see, which is the result of your own work and anchoring it to the literature that you have reviewed. So kailangan ipakita natin sa kanila na ito yung ibig kong sabihin. Sometimes it is, our students cannot easily get when we say things to them, especially if it is too abstract for them to understand. So we need to provide examples to them so that they can better understand what we are saying. Okay, so students need the structure and leadership. Diba? Ito yung, I think I also discussed this in one of the webinar sessions. Sometimes ito lang yung hinahanap, or most of the times, ito yung hinahanap sa atin ng ating mga estudyante. The structure and the leadership, which will also be indicative of our expertise. Diba? They don't need slick videos from us. Alam nila na hindi tayo mga artista, diba? Hindi naman tayo professional in this aspect. But what is important is for us to be able to deliver to them the content that we ask them, that we will need them to understand or study. So, structure and leadership of our teaching presence. So, to move from surface learning, parang recall lang, to a deeper level of engaged learning, up to the application level, is nasabi natin higher order thinking. So, which can take the form of defining clear expectations. Ano ba yung inaasahan natin sa kanila? Sometimes in giving feedback or in giving instructions to our students, we also can give them the rubrics of how we will be evaluating them. And in providing them with the kind of information, we are already defining our expectations. Ano ba yung hinahanap mo doon sa magiging trabaho mo, doon sa magiging output mo? Okay? Selecting and sequencing manageable sections of content. Kailangan, we should be able to organize the content of our course so that there is that progression. There is that progression in terms of understanding, probably from the simple to the complex. Okay? Sometimes you may want to, sabi nga nila, yung tinlip na si Bloom, inuna yung application, and then from there, from the application, then you will draw the concepts that were applied to the building or the application of the particular knowledge. So that can also be done. But we have to organize the content and the process very carefully. Okay, so facilitate this course with engaging questions. We have discussed that, as well as test understanding. And also put them into the critical thinking mode. Okay, structure both collaborative and individual activities. We have discussed that, and assessing learning at a deeper or more complex level, and providing feedback in the process. Okay, so feedback is also an example of teaching presence. Every time we give feedback to our students, we are making our students feel that we are there. Okay? So giving feedback on assignments, diba, whatever submissions, projects, is a critical part of the direct instruction component of teaching presence. Diba? Kasi nakita ni teacher, kahit nga doon sa discussion forum, diba, the moment that we give feedback, na, ay mali ang sinabi nito, or ito dapat ma-highlight ang sinabi nito, o ikaw baka gusto mong mag-respond doon sa sinabi nitong si ganitong classmate mo. In a way, we are already giving feedback to them. Diba? So, giving feedback provides a natural opportunity for one-to-one teaching presence, especially if we are calling the attention or the feedback is being given to a submission by the student, assignment, project, etc. Okay? So effective feedback is a mutual process involving both the student and the instructor, because this is a teacher, a learner-teacher interaction. It also builds confidence. Na, uy, tama pala yung ginagawa ko. So, itutuloy ko to. Or if ever still possible, i-improve ko pa so that I can get a higher mark. So, it can also guide our students. Diba? And put them, it's an ongoing teaching process. It's an ongoing provision on how they will be able to achieve the learning outcomes. We coach them towards a certain direction when we give feedback to them. So it established timelines, no? Kung halimbawa naman, ito yung submission, yung deadline ng submission, then you can expect a feedback from me. Pag hindi ka nag-submit dito, hindi mo matatanggap agad yung feedback ko. So somehow, when there is that expectation for you to give feedback to your students, then they will also be encouraged to submit on time and expect your feedback to the work that they had submitted. So again, being applicable to future situations, because the kind of feedback that you will give can also guide them on how they will do the next task. Okay? So in an online course, it is important for students to get frequent feedback. So are they learning what they are supposed to be learning? Are they achieving the learning outcomes? Because if not, then we can ask them or direct them towards that. The most effective way to ensure that students get the feedback they need to stay on track is through a comprehensive, balanced assessment strategy, so both formative and summative assessment. So you can even have students provide peer feedback. So something that we can also design into our courses, the peer evaluation or the peer feedback. You will be asking your students to review or evaluate each other's work. So there are several ways to provide feedback. It can be individual, written, audio, or video feedback that we give to our students, especially video, especially if we want to model or demonstrate the proper way to do things. Diba? So, i-video natin. There are many platforms now or apps that are free, we can use for free, which can allow us to record ourselves. We don't have to go to a studio, record ourselves and give that kind of feedback to our students. Diba? Ako, I observe na Zoom, the Zoom platform has become my studio, and it has become a way for me to record myself and give like video greetings. If I'm being asked to do video greetings, a welcome video for my class, then the Zoom has become my platform to do it. So I have the free account in Zoom, and that will allow me to record myself for 40 minutes. Diba? But I usually keep it short, like 10-15 minutes only. Group feedback, so it can be in terms of group announcement, yung summary na sinasabi natin kanina na summarizing the discussion forum, then we are already providing group or class feedback, which is this one, aggregated class feedback via whole class announcements or discussion forum. So the group feedback is specifically useful if we are asking our students to do group work. Mga term projects natin, hatiin natin sila sa group by groups, ganyan. And then the feedback will now be in the form of group feedback because they have just one submission. So evidence of engagement. This is also important. If we will be asking what exactly will be the indicators of our engagement or our teaching presence. So ito, announcements, discussion board posts, uploading of photos or videos on the part of the instructor if necessary. It's not enough to log in and monitor a course. Instructors need to show that they are active in the course. So ito yung mga yon. Sumasagot tayo sa mga discussion forum, may mga announcements tayong binibigay, etc. And yung mga feedback na kanina diniscuss natin, that we discussed earlier, these are evidence of our teaching presence or our engagement with our students. So learning management systems can provide some useful data an instructor can use to gauge his or her presence, such as frequency and duration of logging in to a course. So in the same way, these are the same data which can help us in gauging the engagement of our students. There are also features in most learning management system which can allow us, which can allow us to make the students feel our teaching presence. So like for instance, communicating with them directly, emailing them. Just one email in our learning management system, i-check mo lahat yung participants and then send them an email. Diba? So communication is very important for our students to feel that we are with them, that we are present in our courses. So even the summary, mga ginagawa nating summary, aside from posting in the course site, we can also email it to them. In a way, if they are not accessing the course site, it will also be a reminder for them na, hey, there is something that is happening in our course site. You may want to be there, diba? Or if we just want to email a group of students, then we can also do that. Not so much time on our site as teachers, because we know that we do know that we have to manage our time as well. Okay, data analytics, quantitative feedback. Qualitative data is also important. So the type of questions coming from students. Ito, ang example ko dito, of course, there is a discussion forum in my course site for the students to ask questions, okay? But they can also email me if they have urgent clarifications to make. So that is something that is already communicated to them. So instructors can ask students for feedback throughout the course. So how is it going? How am I doing? Etc. Do you have questions? Do you have clarifications? And also, you can build in low stakes evaluation feedback and higher stakes elements. So pwede naman tayo mag-feedback ng ganun lang na, oops, mayroong mga estudyante na parang 1 linggo or 2 linggo nang hindi nag-access sa course site. Diba? So, siselect mo lang yung mga yan. Ang filter mo is students who have not accessed the course site for 2 weeks and send them email. Low stakes evaluation feedback. Higher stakes, yung mga term projects, kung meron tayong mga exams in the middle, etc. So we give our feedback and comments to those works of our students. Okay, so research shows that online instructor presence is associated with effective instruction. If we will be able to integrate those tips in designing our presence from the start, designing our course content, designing the learning activities, facilitating discussion, and providing direct instruction, then we are saying that we are already giving this effective instruction. And on the part of our students, there will be this greater depth of learning. And the students, this is something that we also want to our students to have, that they enjoy the learning journey, and they will be satisfied with the whole learning process. So if we are present in our courses, then we will be able to achieve all these things. Greater depth. Okay, so in summary, what are the tips to improve our online teaching presence? So tip number 1, go beyond speaking presence. Okay, so students view teaching presence through the lens of all the interaction that we have with our teacher. So it's not enough that we have a webinar session with them. Okay, it's not enough that we have a video. So everything, the kind of interaction that we are having with our students will define the teaching presence as far as our students are concerned. So from emails to announcements, assignments, the way we give feedback to them. So the digital tools that we are using will become our extension. Diba? Sabi ko nga kanina, if we already have the different digital tools in our disposal, then it will make this evidence of our presence easier to manage. Announcements, madali man tayo mag-announce. Giving feedback, sabi ko nga, kahit nga video feedback pa yan. So it will now blur the line between our physical and virtual persona. Diba? Kasi mararamdaman nila, and they will no longer feel the difference between the classroom and the virtual course site. So tip number 2, it's more than just FaceTime, no? So your presence as a teacher doesn't begin in the classroom or in the our online course site. It begins long before, as we continue to plan the flow and sequencing of our lessons. Okay? So sabi nga natin, sa simula pa lang, ipaplano na natin yan. Or gagawin na natin. We will design it. It will be part of the design of our course. What we know from research is that effective online learning results from careful instructional design and planning. Again, we start designing our online presence at the start or even before the classes start. Our tip number 3, signal presence through clarity and organization, the way we organize content in our course. So higher levels of clarity are associated with higher levels of student learning. So clarity wasn't limited to a clear explanation of ideas. So we distinguish between content clarity. So my teacher is clear when presenting content, and process clarity. So my content clarity and process clarity. So my teacher communicates clear expectations for learning activities, for assignments, etc. Having a strong teaching presence online might mean that we spend setting up our learning management system, our course site. We design it so that there's a central hub where the resources are gathered. Students won't get lost in navigating the course content, in submitting assignments. Where am I gonna submit this? Where am I gonna post this, etc. How will I send email to my teacher? How am I gonna communicate with my classmates, diba? So lahat ng to, we should be able to anticipate these questions and make navigation in our course site easier for our students. So that's tip number 3. Tip number 4, get student feedback and respond to it. So if we want to improve our online teaching presence, then we should also be communicating with our students. Ask their opinions about matter. So like for instance, on a scale from 1 to 5, how comfortable are you in using the technology in our virtual classroom? Baka sabihin nila, ma'am, sir, hindi ko po alam kung paano ito gamitin. Diba? Have you encountered any technical issues such as not being able to hear me during our synchronous sessions, or not being able to connect to the internet? Somehow we will know the different contexts where our students are. Are my lessons well organized? Is there something that you don't understand? Are there references that you cannot see or find, or dead links? Baka nawala na, di ba? What can I do to improve our online classroom? This is specifically true now that both the teachers and the students are into this online learning journey for the first time. di ba? We really need to be patient with one another. We should not be expecting too much. Kasi nga, lahat tayo, karamihan, if not all, are into this teaching and learning environment for the first time. At lahat ay nangangapa. So, be patient with each other. Be patient with our students. And let us also ask our students, how can we make this effective? How can we make that whole teaching process effective and easier for both of us, the teachers and the students? So ask for their feedback. And tip number 5, focus on surfacing connections and building relationships. Again, we go back to the social or the social dimension of the teaching presence. So we build connection. We build relationships with our students. We connect with them. I think it was a discussion that I also had in one webinar session, that what is important is the human connection, diba? It's mediated by technology, but they can still feel that what is at the end of that platform or that technology is someone who is totoong tao. Hindi ako nakikipag-usap sa chatbot, 'di ba? Usong-uso 'yan ngayon. Chatbot yung ka-email mo, 'di ba? This is important so we can offset that isolating effects of an online class. That we can provide that sense of belongingness to our students. The sense of isolation is very common in this kind of learning environment that we have now. By surfacing connections, building relationships, somehow we can provide that sense of belongingness to our students, even if we are not meeting each other face-to-face in the classroom. So there are dozens ways to create a sense of human connection. You can start every day with an informal morning meeting or greetings. Asking your students, hey, how are you doing? Or you can record and share a video greetings that students can respond on their own time. Yung pag-open nila ng course site nila, uy, may bagong post dito si ma'am or si sir. Hi, how are you doing? Are there any challenges that you are encountering now? Good, ganyan-ganyan ba? So somehow we are connecting with our students. Okay? Effects of online teaching presence. Research results demonstrate that the design and organization, as well as facilitating this course, can facilitate students' interaction among themselves, reduce the number of peripheral students, yung mga naiiwan, no? Yung parang feeling nila hindi sila kasama sa klase, and facilitate students' collaborative knowledge construction, yung learning nila, no? Especially in the knowledge sharing, discovery, discussion, and application. And in so doing, somehow, hopefully, these strategies can prevent course dropout, no? Talagang mapapatapos natin silang lahat sa kurso natin. And direct instruction has positive effects on teacher centrality. Tayo pa rin, tayo yung teacher. We may not be, we may not have designed it like we are the sage on the stage, that we are just the guide on the side, but somehow we are still the prominent figure in terms of the theorizing, in terms of our role. The instruction dimension of our teaching presence will still be felt by our students. Okay, so this is something that that we need to think about. Of course, as I have mentioned, we discuss most of the discussions are anchored in an online learning environment. But we know that we have students who may not have regular or stable access to the internet or no access at all. So the call now is, or something that we need to think about is, how can we still establish or design our teaching presence under these circumstances? Mahina, hindi regular, or walang access at all. Of course, it is important that we will be able to know exactly what is the context of our students. Sino talaga yung walang access? Sino yung nahihirapang mag-access? O kung may access naman pala siya, baka somehow ma-access niya yung course site. Pero yung wala talaga. Naku ma'am sir, talagang wala eh. So, somehow, anong gagawin natin so that the students can still feel that we are there with them in their learning journey? So ito yung some suggestions. I'm sure you can still add to this list. given your experience in handling this group of students. So in the design of the printed course materials, write as if you are talking to them. Okay, so, di ba, ginawa na natin yung mga course materials natin, ginawa natin yung mga lesson plan natin, etc. So, we write as if we are talking to them. Like, okay, so, at the end of the session or at the end of the module, at the end of the lesson, you should be able to, diba? So, every time we give instruction, we put there you. So, it's as if we are talking to them, connecting with them. In giving direct instruction, we are being connected to them already, even if it is a printed material. Okay? So provide direct instructions, especially to doing learning activities and how to submit them. Clear yung process. It's not just the content that is clear, but also the process is clear. Okay. How are you going to do this learning activity? What resources will you be needing, etc. Diba? So we give that clearly to them, the process. Establish effective ways of connecting or communicating with them. Kung wala talagang access sa internet, pwede ba na text messaging ang gawin natin? Diba? So, kaya nga kailangan nating igrupo para alam natin na itong particular na students na to, itong mga grupo na estudyante na to, this is how I will communicate with them. 3 times a week, etc. kung hindi kaya ng everyday. If with little access to internet, probably the messenger will do, or even accessing to the course site will do. Feedback, again, as we have discussed earlier, feedback is an effective way of establishing our teaching presence. So we give feedback. If they have submitted their course requirements written, then we also provide the written feedback to their submission. In a way, they will still feel connected with us. In a way, they will still feel our teaching presence. Okay? So these are the references that I have used in this presentation. If you are interested and you have time, you can also access these links and read more about online and teaching presence. I mean, it's a very interesting thing for you to really study that how we can really integrate our teaching presence in our online course site.